Three vital points are up for grabs tomorrow as Chelsea return home to Stamford Bridge following our European escapade up to Geneva in midweek to take on our close neighbours and London rivals Crystal Palace in the Premier League. But who will start and how can we best our opponents in this match? Lads, lasses and the rest of the masses, welcome back to the lead-in. Let's go. So let's firstly set the scene and then we'll get into some predicted lineups. It's Chelsea versus Crystal Palace, a fixture that has been extremely one-sided in favour of the Blues in recent history. In fact, we have won 14 matches in a row in all competitions against them, with their most recent victory coming all the way back in October of 2017. Let's briefly touch on our opponents first. Palace are currently sitting 17th in the Premier League after the first two games of the season, unable to get a single point as of yet as they were bested by two other London rivals in Brentford and West Ham. They are coming into this game off of the back of a win though, with them beating Norwich City 4-0 in the EFL Cup on Tuesday, so they'll be trying to bring some of that good form into this game. Let's take a look at their transfer business this summer. Firstly, their outgoings. They lost some big names in Michael Olise and Joachim Andersen, as well as Jordan Ayew and Sam Johnson, who are other notable names to leave. But they've done some pretty good business in terms of incomings. Olise was replaced by Ismail Assar, Maxence Lacroix has come in to replace Andersen, and they also bolstered the ranks with talented players like Eddie Nketiah, Daichi Kamada on a free, and our boy Trevor Chalobah on loan as well. Overall, their team has gotten a little weaker, I would say, but they've got better depth now, so we'll have to find out who they will field against us. That being said, let's take a look at the possible lineup for this Palace team and see what we'll be up against. Firstly, let's talk absentees. The Eagles are without a few players. Mateus Franca is still injured, and joining him is new signing Chadi Riyad, who got a knock in the cup tie versus Norwich. Trevor Chalobah won't be able to play against his parent club, but he wouldn't be expected to play anyway considering how recent his arrival was. The same could be said for Maxence Lacroix, but I have a sneaky suspicion that the Frenchman may feature here. I'll be putting Oliver Glasner's side into the same 3-4-3 formation that they played against the Canaries, with most of the strong team they fielded returning to the starting 11 here. First up in goal is going to be Dean Henderson. Sam Johnson has moved away and his replacement in Matt Turner isn't taking Dean's starting place in my opinion. The defence is going to be slightly changed, so starting on the right of the three, I expect to see Rob Holding. I don't think 33-year-old Nathaniel Klein will play so soon after he started in midweek. In the centre will be ex-Chelsea man and England star Mark Gay, who after a long transfer saga, Palace fans will be glad to have kept a hold of. Finally, finishing off this line, I'd love to be giving the aforementioned Lacroix his debut, but instead I'm going with the safe option of American Chris Richards. Moving into the midfield, we'll start with a right wing back. This is quite clearly going to be young Colombian Daniel Munoz. The two central midfielders will change slightly, as I expect Adam Wharton to return to the side. I'll be replacing Doucouré with him. Next to him on the left, I will expect Will Hughes to start once again, though Doucouré could also shift over here. Finally, on the left side, I'm going to be putting in Tyrick Mitchell. Moving into the attacking roles, let's start with the right side, where I expect scorer last time out, Daichi Kamada, to start once more. On the left will of course be their starman Eberechi Eze, and finally, down the centre will be the big Frenchman Jean-Philippe Mateta, who scored a brace last time out with an audacious overhead kick in the mix as well to lead the line. That's just a brief look at what their team could look like. Their centre-back situation is all over the place for this fixture, with all three of their new signings likely not playing, so maybe we see something different there. Now let's turn our attention to Chelsea and see what our lineup for this game could be. We don't have too many absentees for this one, just Reece James through suspension and Romeo Lavia through injury. New signing Jadon Sancho will be unable to feature, and neither will the newly departed Raheem Sterling, who's moved to Arsenal. Apart from that, everyone is available for this one, so I'll be putting Enzo Maresca's Chelsea team in the 4-3-3 formation once again, with a much stronger side than we saw in Geneva. Starting with the goalkeeper, I'm going to be putting in Robert Sanchez. Nothing changes here, he's our number one and will start once again. For the back four, this is going to have wholesale changes from the Servette game, with Malo Gusto returning to the right back spot after he was rested. Likewise, both Wesley Fofana and Levi Colwill will make a return in the right and left centre-back spots respectively. Finishing off the backline will be Marc Cucurella, who hasn't put a foot wrong since he returned to the side. Moving into the midfield, there's going to be a bit of a conundrum to solve here. With Lavia injured, I'd expect Moises Caicedo to start in the 6, despite he himself having to be rested versus Servette. Ahead of him is likely going to be Enzo Fernandez once again, even though he played from the start in midweek. Alongside him will be Cole Palmer, who will be looking to add to his goal/assist tally after bagging 4 last weekend. Ahead of them in the attacking roles, let's start on the right. Hat-trick hero Noni Madueke will start him once again, looking to try and get ahead of Erling Haaland in the top goal scorers chart in this one. On the left, I'm going to be putting in Pedro Neto, as Mudryk started against Servette and will most likely be rested here. Finally, up top will be Nicholas Jackson, and with no new striker coming in, he is our main man once again. I expect him to really prove himself this season, and this game could be just the start he needs to kickstart his campaign. Now, as I have been doing in these videos, let's touch on a few substitutes I'd like to see Enzo Maresca make in this game. We get to make 5 substitutes in this match as per Premier League rules, but I only expect 4 to be made in this one. The 4 men I'd personally like to see make an appearance are Joao Felix, Christopher Nkunku, Kiernan Dewsbury Hall, and last but not least, Renato Vega. Apart from that, I think this is a solid team and perfectly capable of beating Palace, and we'll talk about how in a little bit. But before we do, it's time for today's comment question of the day, so answer me this. Out of 10, what would you rate Chelsea's transfer window, and why? Let me know in the comments down below with QOTD at the start as always, and I'll heart my favourite answers. Now let's take a look at how Chelsea can navigate this game tactically, and see how we can beat Palace in this game. Before we go any further, in case you missed it, memberships are now available on the channel. For as low as 99p a month, you can become a member by clicking the join button below the video and unlock access to exclusive perks such as badges, emotes, and my members only Discord where I'll be running my FPL mini league where you can compete to win prizes, as well as watch bonus videos that I can't put here on YouTube, and more. I really hope to create a thriving community in the server, and the money goes directly to supporting me and the channel, so if you're interested, become a member today and join the masses. Now let's get back to the video. Okay, so here we have the team that I have put out in my prediction, and as usual, let's kind of move the team into the formation that we expect them to be in, and that's going to be that kind of 3-3-4 formation that we always see. Caicedo obviously will move over, Gusto will be the fullback to invert. I don't think we will see Cucurella inverting anytime soon, considering the setup that we've been using. Fofana will go to the right, Colwill will operate in the central centre-back role, and then obviously Cucurella will act as this left centre-back. And we create this box in the midfield, which can also turn into a diamond, depending on which kind of phase of play we're in, right? So obviously Palmer can be that player that can go central if he needs to, but for the most part, I think in this game in particular, we're going to kind of set up with the 2 players back here and then the 2 players up top here, just because of the way that Crystal Palace kind of set up. And I think that the way that they set up is actually really interesting, because this game is kind of be a tale of the 2 formations, because we and Palace kind of set up fairly similarly, just with the players distributed slightly differently. Now obviously I've got this 3 at the back, and I've got Palace playing in their away kit because I couldn't to make this red and blue, but there we go. So we've got them in their away kit. We have this back 3 that they'll probably be playing, and our formation kind of interacts with this back 3 in good ways and in bad ways, and we're going to kind of go through that in this little bit of a breakdown here. The first thing of note is that something we've spoken about in the past, right? So Maresca ball and the way that he's always played this style loves to create these 1v1s, and more specifically the 1v1s out wide, but also 1v1s with the striker, and we can do that fairly easily, and it kind of happens automatically with this system as we have a front 3 and they have a back 3. And if we can get success from these 1v1s and win our 1v1 duels, I think that we'll get a lot of success here, especially on this right hand side. I think that Madueke obviously is our best 1v1 winger, and he is going to be very successful up against anyone that is defending against him. Likewise with Neto, we've seen Neto has that burst of acceleration to get away from players, and it really does depend on who is playing in which of these wide centre-back roles for Crystal Palace. Now, we spoke about earlier in the episode the fact that they have brought in centre-backs to replace Joachim Andersen, who's gone out, and they've also got an injured centre-back at the moment. One of their new signings has got injured. The other 2 signings haven't kind of arrived yet, and they will probably not be able to play, so one of these roles is going to have to be taken up by either Rob Holding or Klein, and it will likely be the right side that does that. And I think in that case Neto is going to be kind of the more deadly of the two wingers, because I think that whoever is here, whoever here is Klein or Holding is going to be the weakest out of all the centre backs that they have. Obviously they have Mark Gay, who will probably play in the central role, and then they'll have Chris Richards on one of the 2 sides. So whichever one Chris Richards isn't on is pretty much the weaker of the side, and we kind of see that whichever centre back matches up against Neto on this right hand side, which I kind of expect it to be, will probably be their weakness in their backline, and kind of the 1v1 that we want to win the most, with obviously him trying to go around the outside and then putting balls across. And for the most part, because of the way they set up with wingbacks, these opportunities will happen. As I said, they kind of happen automatically, but they'll happen more so on the transition and on counterattacks. And when I talk about the transition, I don't just mean from counterattacking opportunities. I mean also when we play the way that we do and we kind of play through the lines of a team and they have their players committed further up the pitch, and we can kind of play through them and get into these scenarios. Say, for example, they've committed up the pitch with their fullbacks, or their wingbacks rather, then we can get these opportunities to create these 1v1s and then create danger from here. Now let's bring the rest of the Palace players in here, because it paints an interesting picture in terms of the formations. Obviously they play this 3-4-3, and we in a way do also play a 3-4-3. Just again, as we kind of spoke about earlier, the way that we distribute our fours are different. Obviously our fours are very narrow in this box, and their four is very, very wide with the two wing backs out wide, and that kind of difference is what's going to be the main patterns of play that we'll kind of see here. Obviously their wing backs are going to be one of the main sources of their threat in general, where they'd like to try and get high, and when they do get high they occupy the wide spaces. And the wingers that they have, the quote-unquote wingers that we kind of have here, that would usually be wingers in a 4-3-3, they don't really act like wingers, they act more like inside 10s. Obviously we have Enzo, who can play as a 10, we have Daichi Kamada, who is naturally a central attacking player, or a 10, and they'll occupy these two spaces here and obviously kind of be marked by Caicedo and Gusto. And whilst they're doing that, the wing backs will be the ones to commit forward and try and go around the outside and be able to put balls into the box for Mateta, who's obviously very, very good aerially. And that's part of the reason why Mateta has been so successful and under this new system of Glasner's, is that fact that they do get really wide, they do put balls into the box, and he is such a good aerial threat, and as well as a hold-up man and just in general a good finisher, that he can kind of be the one that's going to get on the end of those, and they really do like to stretch the play and get wide here. Now, on the contrary to this, we play the complete opposite way, right? We play instead of playing with our central players coming into these 10 roles and us having the wing backs play wide, we do the opposite, where we have our wingers, the wingers, or the more attacking like inside players as they would have, they are the ones that operate really wide, and then we have the two inside players to come here and take this space that they have with their wingers, right? So instead of us having wing backs, we have the wingers, and they obviously have the wing backs, and then instead of the central players that they would have with Kamada and Eza, we have Enzo and Palmer here. And obviously Palmer is suited to playing as a 10, Enzo's not as suited as playing as a 10, and obviously, as I said, we kind of will see him drop deeper, and Palmer kind of operates more as a central player and will kind of drift across the front line. But for the most part, that's kind of how we set up, and it's very different because, again, as I said, we are very narrow, they're very wide, and even though we attack very wide, our build-up is quite narrow. And ultimately what this kind of does is it basically means that we're playing in the exact same formations, right? For the most part, when we are attacking, we play in the same formations. They are basically the identical positions. The positions that are occupied are the same, just the personnel is different. And what I kind of expect this to lead into is that both teams in this game are going to either really, really struggle defensively against each other, or just have really, really good successful attacks on both sides, or it's going to be the complete opposite and the game is going to be really, really crowded, really impossible to break down both teams, and they will both struggle to score goals. Admittedly, I don't think the latter is very likely, considering the quality of the two sets of players. I think we are going to see quite a lot of goals in this one. I'll be very, very surprised if we get a 0-0 draw, for example, because obviously, again, we have this similar setup where in wide areas we can obviously expose them when they don't have the wing backs back, and likewise for them, when their wing backs are going forward, they can expose us in the same areas. Now let's talk about that kind of Palace wide attack a little bit more here, because I think genuinely we will probably struggle more in these wide attack scenarios than Palace will, just simply because our team with this inversion of Gusto is really, really weak on the wings. We've seen it this entire season so far, and in every single game we've played in pre-season, and pretty much every single game that we've played either in the Premier League season and in the Europa Conference League, we've been exposed on the wide areas because, again, with Gusto not occupying the space, the gaps are much bigger, and obviously he comes into here. And though this will mean that they will struggle to play through Wharton and Hughes, I think those two are going to have a bit of a torrid time up against this 4 that we have. That's going to be a struggle for them, and they're going to have to try and play it wide. And I think we'll likely see more triangles out wide for them than they will play centrally. Obviously, we'll probably play a bit more centrally because we have the man advantage here. When they do get into these scenarios where Gusto hasn't been able to get back, they are going to cause us absolute trouble. And I can tell that Tyreek Mitchell on this left-hand side is going to have a pretty good role to play. Obviously, Eza can play here as well. And obviously, I've simplified things here by saying that obviously Eza and Kamada will operate in these central roles. They will interchange. We will see Mitchell come out here into the central role with Eza going around the outside too, just to show a little bit of a different look. We'll see that at times, but for the most part, it will be Mitchell making this overlap. And if Fofana isn't able to get out to him because he's marking, for example, Eza here, then he's going to be free for this pass. If they do get on the ball in these areas, for example, they can play the ball out wide here. Then we've got all of this space to drive into, and that's going to be a big danger for us. The issue that they might face against us though, despite these wide areas being promising, is the central areas might be very difficult to play through. Obviously, their two most creative players are Eze and Kamada in these central roles that we kind of spoke about. If Caicedo and Gusto are playing deeper here and are matching up here, they might struggle to even get on the ball and kind of be able to create these opportunities. Obviously, they'd be able to touch it through and kind of get it out to the wide areas, but once it's out in the wide areas, if we have Gusto here and we're kind of doubling up, like, where are they going to go? They can't really do much. If they pass it this way, then it's fine. Obviously, Enzo and Palmer will come back to support, obviously, and Madueke and Neto. We've seen this as a very common theme under Maresca, is that our wingers do like to defend now, and obviously this will kind of be the double up here. Can they be able to make this 3v2 actually work for them is kind of a big question that they'll have to figure out. And if we are defending very deep like this, which I don't think we'll defend deep like this for the majority of the time, obviously we've kind of seen that from the Norwich game, that Palace don't really get a lot of possession when teams like to keep possession against them. Like, again, Norwich are a lower league side and they managed to get 57%, I believe, possession against Palace. So I don't think there will be many opportunities where they do have just extended periods on the ball where they kind of have to try and break us down. I think the majority of their danger will come from those counter-attacking opportunities whilst Madueke is still high up the pitch. But even now, when they have this 2v2, it's still going to be a struggle, and they're going to have to get someone over, maybe Mateta. There have to be a little bit of trickery from maybe Eze or Mitchell trying to burst to try and get around Fofana. They're going to have to be creative, and that's not just for Palace, it's for us too. We're going to struggle with the same thing because the formations are so similar, and because we match up 5v5 pretty much everywhere all over the pitch. It's going to be very, very difficult for both sets of players to kind of just play simple patterns of play. We have to have some kind of inspiration, some kind of spark from one of the players to kind of do that. For Palace, I reckon that will be Eza who will be able to do that. For us, it will likely be Palmer. We know how good Palmer is at unlocking defenses, and we'll just kind of have to wait and see which of the two teams can do that. Now, let's kind of look at Chelsea, where the opposite is kind of true. We obviously will be trying to play mainly through the centre because we have the man advantage in the central areas. So I think a lot of our success will be centrally here, where we have the extra men and can play around Wharton and Hughes, who obviously 2v4 are not going to be very, very comfortable in this scenario. They're going to need to get support from Eza and Kamada, but if they are staying wide and trying to occupy our centre backs, for example, on the press, they do like to press. Palace obviously are a high press side at times. They do like to get up in your face and be aggressive and be full of energy. If they are doing that, then we're going to have these opportunities where playing the ball centrally is going to be very viable for us because they don't have much cover to kind of stop us from doing it. Where we will probably struggle though is when we get further up the pitch, and when they do commit their wing backs further back and they play into this 5, we're going to really struggle to break down 5 at the back. We've seen it before that when we played Wrexham, for example, we struggled to break down a 5 at the back, and in general, as I said, because we kind of match up 5v5 in these areas, it's really hard for us to kind of make inroads, especially when they sit back like this. They're not just going to have this. The two central players, obviously Wharton and Hughes, will drop deep as well, and we'll have this like 7v5, and it'll be very, very difficult for us to kind of break down. That's probably where we'll struggle. And obviously I'm kind of oversimplifying things a little bit here, so I'm not going into too much detail, but I will kind of break down kind of how Chelsea will have to play from the build-up phase a little bit, because I think that this is what's going to ultimately decide whether we can win this game or whether we can lose this game. As we kind of saw in the Wolves game, one of the things which was really impactful was the ability for us to move the ball quickly and be able to move the ball under pressure. We struggled to do that in the first half versus Wolves, and they were very successful against us, but we managed to remedy those issues in the second half, and we kind of tore them apart. Similar thing could happen here against Palace. They will probably start very, very fast. They will obviously try and put the foot on the gas, put us under pressure, stop us from being able to play out. But eventually, I feel like we'll be able to figure it out, and if we are playing quick enough, we will be able to play it around them. And obviously, we will have the more players in the central areas to kind of do that. And obviously, with them playing in midweek, they played a very full strength team against Norwich on Tuesday, so they're going to actually be a little bit more tired than us. Obviously, we travelled to Geneva, which is obviously going to take it out of the players, but the majority of the players that we are fielding in this game, or I expect us to field in this game, didn't play against Servette in that game, so we should in theory be the fresher team. So eventually, when we get to the latter stages of the game, we might have a bit more energy. We might be able to play it around them as they kind of tire and they don't press us as intently and give us that extra half second to kind of play the ball, as we kind of saw that Wolves kind of dropped off in the second half, and we managed to get that extra second, and Caicedo was able to kind of dictate play from his position. And what I kind of theorize happening here is that we will see kind of what we saw happen against Norwich, right, where Norwich got a lot of the ball, and I think that Chelsea are obviously a much better possession-based side than Norwich City are. I think that we will be able to retain the ball for large periods of this game, and we'll probably see, as I mentioned, them kind of drop into their shape and us struggle to break them down, because like we've seen in the past. Now, I want to speak directly about how we can kind of play out from the back, and we spoke about in the tactical breakdown of the Wolves game how Enzo was doing this thing where he was dropping into wide areas to provide that option and kind of vacating his space so someone would follow him and we get more space centrally. I don't think that's going to work as well in this kind of game, just because of the way that Palace are so wide, and obviously they have the players out here to kind of mark this position. So what we kind of will more likely see is Enzo actually dropping deeper into central areas, or more so kind of Caicedo dropping deeper into central areas with Enzo kind of supporting here. And once we can kind of play around the press and get the ball to Enzo, obviously then it's his task to try and get his head up, play the balls into our attacking areas and try and get us on that transition through the lines. And as I said, I just think that it's a little bit less viable for Enzo to be making these movements out to the right hand side where he can easily be tracked, and we don't really gain much in the way of space centrally because we have a man advantage here anyway. So our space is actually, when we have more players here, we have more viability to actually play through the centre. When we vacate that space and put our players wide, it actually gives them the advantage because they have less players to kind of mark in the centre with Wharton and Hughes. However, there is one caveat to this, and that's if Palace decide to overcommit to their press, right? We've seen, obviously, they are a high press team. They like to be aggressive. If they do overcommit, and we see, for example, we see these players, the wide wing backs push up to mark the centre backs. We see the inside players kind of matching up with Caicedo and Gusto. If we see this overcommittal of players and we see these wide players go forward, what we can see then is Enzo doing that and dropping into this wide area, because I think what will end up happening is Sanchez getting the ball and being able to play the ball over the top. And again, this is a very rare situation. I don't think Palace would be stupid enough to actually do and commit over and press this aggressively. I don't think they would do that, considering. But if they do this, obviously Enzo can get that space, and now if you can see here just from this very crude demonstration that when we have the ball here, the amount of space we now have to operate in, obviously Palmer's marked by 2 players, Enzo will probably be marked by this player by this point. We can easily get it out to one of our attacking players, and then again we create those 1v1s in these scenarios. And obviously on the counter-attack, I back us to score on the counter-attack more than most teams. We are very deadly, we have a lot of pace, we have players that are very good at quick one-touch passing, like Jackson, for example. I think kind of a pattern we probably could see here is if the ball does get out to Enzo from a long ball, Jackson will be the player to kind of drop, receive the ball, and then play forward from there, because we see how good he is at doing that. Obviously, when we play it from Sanchez, this is quite risky because, again, they are so high up, and if we do misplace this pass, we could just give it straight off the pitch, or we could play it straight back to them. We saw against Norwich, they like to press really high, and Norwich kind of at times had to play the ball long, and their centre-backs were winning the ball, kind of like what we did against Wolves in the second half. I think they do that very well. We can't really fall into that trap as well, so we'll try and play short, but we did see from the Wolves game that Sanchez does have a long ball in him. He can distribute the ball when they commit high, and maybe Palace will learn from that. We'll have to wait and see. If they do commit too aggressively like this, obviously we're going to see us be able to pick them apart. And I do think in general, I kind of spoke about this a little bit, but I think in general Sanchez is going to be very, very vital to the way that we build up in this game specifically, because again, if they do press really, really high, and obviously we will have this matching 5v5 here, right? That's what we've kind of spoken about. And this could be a 5v5 with the wingbacks committed forward. It could be a 5v5 with the midfielders committed forward. It depends on who decides to go at the time. It'll probably be a mixture of the two. One fullback will likely stay back whilst the other one goes forward, and the midfielder will come up to kind of make that 5 with one of the central 10 players kind of going a bit wide. That's more likely what we'll kind of see, in my opinion. When they do this and they match up 5v5, Sanchez is obviously the spare player, and what his job is to do here is to create this domino effect of player movement. Obviously, he's the free man, and when he's on the ball, he will delay, and someone will press him. Most likely, Mateta will press him. It's his job now that with this movement to try and find the spare player, because once we find the spare player, and maybe this will be Caicedo dropping deep or Cucurella dropping deep into this position, we kind of see this. When this happens, we get that spare player, because someone is going to be spare. These two will obviously be marked. Once we get to Cucurella, again, the press will happen again, and the ball will have to go to whoever is spare. A lot of the times we'll kind of see this, where we're going to get to see us playing across our box, and it's very scary, and obviously we're trained to do that, our players are trained to do that, and it is fearful for us fans seeing these risky passes being played. But then once we've kind of got that movement again, it's just a matter of shifting the ball quick enough for us to get that one incisive pass that kind of catches them out. For example, if we see Enzo drop a little bit deeper and the ball's gone out to Cucurella here, and the press comes, and say this player sees Enzo's run and goes, oh, I need to mark him, now Caicedo's free, we can kind of move into this space and then go forward from there, which we kind of can't do if they are matching us up 5v5. We have to make this happen ourselves with our quick passing, and again, it's one of those situations where we're going to have to be very, very quick. We're going to have no hesitation with our passing, because Palace, again, are a good team. If we give them opportunities to get the ball back in these high areas, they will score. We know how deadly they can be. Obviously, they haven't had the greatest start in the league so far, but we know how good they can be. And admittedly, they were very unlucky to not get a draw against Brentford with that disallowed goal. I digress. We will need to be on our A game against Palace, because I think they are a bogey team. Even though we have beaten them so many times in the past, in recent history, and we basically never lose to Palace, we do need to be careful. They are a much better side than they have been in recent times, and they could definitely punish us if we are not sharp and we are as sloppy as we were in the first half versus Wolves. I think we need to really learn from that previous fixture and kind of start this game quickly, because we know how Palace can play, and again, we know how they can set up defensively. If they get an early goal and then they sit back in this 5 with two defensive midfielders here, it's going to be an absolute slog of a game, and we're going to be in one of those situations where we struggle to break the team down. Then the crowd, obviously it's at Stamford Bridge, the crowd will get on the players' backs and they'll start booing and chanting for Conor Gallagher and things like that, and then the game will just turn into a mess. We need to basically really, really be sharp here and kind of start quickly. Just play with the freedom that we played against Wolves in the second half. Our players should be confident enough that they can do this. They've obviously shown that they can do it. Madueke is obviously off the back of a hat-trick. Palmer got 4 goals / assists in that game. They'll be feeling on top of the world. Obviously, Jackson has yet to score. He will probably try and be more involved in this one, and I think that, especially considering we haven't bought a striker in the transfer window, I think that he's going to really try and step up and kind of be like, hey, I'm the main man now, and hopefully he can get a goal or 2 in this one. We'll have to wait and see come game day. For a score prediction, I'm going to be predicting a routine victory over Palace for Chelsea. I'm going for a 3-1 result, with Jackson scoring a brace and Neto getting the other. As for Palace, considering our defensive frailties to high balls, Mateta is the man to score for me. We'll have to wait until the game to see if any of my predictions are correct, and as always, I will be live streaming immediately after the game with Feeling Blue to review the match, so make sure you come through if you are able. But if you can't wait until then, YouTube reckons you'll enjoy one of these 2 videos on screen in the meantime. Thank you guys so much for watching as ever, and remember, in the rain or in the dry, keep that blue flag flying high. Come on, you Blues!